Hi everyone, it's Leela with Miss Kiss Creations. Welcome back to my channel. Today's beginner's tumbler tutorial, I'm going to show you how I created this USA themed glittered power wash tumbler. And like always, all of my materials, including direct links and coupon codes, will be listed in my description below, including where I received the water slide on the tumbler from, which is from the Vinyl Cottage. Her water slides are all pre-printed and pre-sealed, so the only thing you have to do is place it in water and then place it on the tumbler. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started with this tutorial. I'm using a 20-ounce stainless steel tumbler that I sanded down with a 180 grit sanding block, and I wiped it down with 91% alcohol. I'm using 3 of these colors from Color Shot that I purchased from Walmart, and I'm spray painting my tumbler with all 3 colors. So I'm spray painting each color from top to bottom. I'm just making thick lines or stripes from the top to the bottom of the tumbler. I am going to do the power wash method, so if you want to just spray paint white all around the tumbler, then you can do that because there's a lot going on with this tumbler, but I just wanted to see how it would look with all 3 of the colors. It does not have to be a gloss, satin, or matte finish. Whichever finish you have on hand, that's the finish you can use. Just let that dry for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then we'll move on with epoxy in the cup. I added painter's tape inside the tumbler to protect the inside of the tumbler from the paint, and once the paint was dried, I then removed the tape. The next step is to add glitter to the tumbler. I am using the epoxy method to add my glitter to the tumbler. You want to use a very thin amount of epoxy, so about 2 milliliters of epoxy total. That's 1 milliliters part A and 1 milliliters part B, totaling about 2 milliliters of epoxy. You don't want a lot of epoxy, you just want a little bit for the epoxy to act as an adhesive for the glitter, so the glitter can have something to stick to. If you add too much epoxy, then the epoxy is going to absorb the glitter, and the glitter is not going to have that shine, and it's going to look rough in some places. Make sure you're adding this epoxy very evenly around your tumbler so your glitter can have a nice even base to stick to. I know it's really hard to add a very small amount of epoxy on a tumbler, so heating up the epoxy some with a heat gun really does help smooth out that epoxy and helps you lay that epoxy down on the tumbler. All of the glitter that I'm using for this tumbler is from Glitter Heart Co. My first color is Diamonds. It's my absolute favorite color from Glitter Heart Co. I use this on a lot of my tumblers. I'm applying this with the cap open because I didn't want to add too much to camouflage that red, white, and blue background, but I wanted to add enough just to have that nice sparkle, and you can see how beautiful that is on that tumbler. After I applied this glitter all over the tumbler, I then added some crushed candy cane, which is a red chunky glitter, and then some Blizzard, which is a blue chunky glitter, and I just added that randomly around the tumbler, and it doesn't stick to all of the places because the Diamonds is sticking to the tumbler, but you'll see that it's sticking just enough to have that random effect and just give it a little bit extra sparkle. Once I added all of my glitter to my tumbler, I then let my tumbler spin on the cup turner for about 4 hours. I then turned off of my cup turner, and then I let my tumbler air dry or air cure for another 4 hours. So my total drying time is about 8 hours. You could probably do a little bit more, but I chose 8 hours. And this is not the 24-hour drying time, but since I'm placing such a small amount of epoxy on this tumbler, it did not need to be a 24-hour wait time to have my epoxy cured. And the next step, I am placing more epoxy over this epoxy, so I necessarily didn't need to have the 24-hour curing time since I'm going to add more epoxy over this first base of epoxy. So I hope that made sense. So now my tumbler has been curing for about 8 hours, and now I'm going in with that second coat of epoxy to lock in and seal that glitter in. Make sure that glitter has enough epoxy over it. I used about 15 to 20 milliliters of epoxy total, so just round up to 20. I'd rather have more left over, so that's 10 milliliters part A and 10 milliliters part B, totaling 20 milliliters of epoxy to have a nice even coat of epoxy over my tumbler. I then let my tumbler spin on the cup turner for 4 hours. I then turn off my cup turner and then let it air dry or air cure for another 20 hours. You need a total drying time of 24 hours because you want your tumbler to be completely cured before moving on to the next step, which is going to be the power wash spray paint method. And here is that tumbler with the epoxy cured on it for 24 hours. Look how beautiful that shine is. So the power wash method is using the Dawn dish soap power wash soap. And all you do is you spray that soap on your tumbler and then you wipe it off or you rinse it off with water. I use a water on pot because I don't have a water hose. So you'll see I'm first spraying a big spot, and that's where I'm going to place that water slide. Anywhere that soap is placed, that's where the spray paint won't be on the tumbler. So I spray painted all around the tumbler after placing the soap on the tumbler, and then I rinsed off with that water. I'm placing 2 colors on this tumbler, so I'm using some paper towels to blot my tumbler as much as I can, just removing any excess water, spraying again with the power wash all over the tumbler just randomly, but keeping that spot open, and then spraying it with my blue spray paint and then rinsing it off with my water inside of my tote. You can see I use the white area for that water slide spot. Again, anywhere that you place your Dawn dish soap, that's where your spray paint won't be painted on your tumbler. So it's really cool how you can kind of control where you want your tumbler to be spray painted and where you want that space to be left blank. And look how beautiful that is. After I spray paint my tumbler with the power wash, I then let it dry for about 30 minutes total to make sure that paint is completely dried. I am not going in with another coat of epoxy yet. I am placing my water slide on my tumbler. I love the water slides from the Vinyl Cottage. They are very, very vibrant and so easy to use. You place it in the water for about 10 to 15 seconds and that backing comes right off of the water slide. And you can see I placed some of that water slide over the spray painted area, and you can see how vibrant those colors still pop behind or in front of the red and blue spray paint. So these water slides are amazing. They are pre-sealed, pre-printed. They come just like that. All you have to do is place it in the water and then place it easily on your tumbler. Once I place it on my tumbler, I then blot it with a paper towel just to get rid of any of the excess water. I then let that dry for about 30 minutes, making sure that all the water is dried from the tumbler, and then we move on to our last coat of epoxy. For my last coat of epoxy, I'm using about 25 milliliters of epoxy total. That's 12.5 milliliters part A and 12.5 milliliters of part B, totaling 25 milliliters of epoxy. I will say if you do a coat of epoxy and you think that's not enough, you can always go back in after this coat and do another coat of epoxy. So let's say this coat wasn't enough, or there was bumps on it, or it didn't cover a paint spot. I would then go in with probably about 10 milliliters of epoxy total, so 5 mLs part A and 5 mLs part B. I then let my tumbler spin on the cup turner for 4 hours. I then turned off my cup turner and let my tumbler air dry or air cure for about 20 hours. My total drying time for this tumbler was 24 hours to make sure that epoxy is completely cured. Make sure that you are looking at your drying times, whichever epoxy brand you're using. I know that there's Fast Set, there's epoxy that cures in 5 hours. So whichever brand of epoxy you're using, just read the instructions and go by that epoxy brand. And once my epoxy was cured on my tumbler, I then took an X-Acto knife or a razor blade and I cut the rim and the inside of the tumbler, removing any of that epoxy that may have cured in those areas. I then took 100% acetone and I wiped down the rim and the inside of the tumbler just in case any paint was left over on the inside. And then the final step was washing the inside and outside of my tumbler with soap. Make sure you wipe it down very well, especially on the inside, to remove any chemicals that may have been placed on the inside of the tumbler. And once I was finished with that, I added the lid to the tumbler and it is ready to go. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more tumbler and craft videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.